The auditorium was electric, a sea of tailored suits and expectant faces, all bathed in the cool blue light of the stage. On that stage, Harrison Vance, CEO of Kronos Dynamics, was in his element. He was a man carved from ambition and polished by success, and he knew how to command a room. Today was the launch of the Kronos Future Innovators Initiative, a national high school robotics competition designed to find the next generation of engineering talent. It was also, not coincidentally, a massive PR opportunity. "We believe in opening doors," Harrison boomed, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity. "We believe in creating opportunities where none exist. It's not just about finding talent, it's about making it." He paused for effect, letting the applause wash over him. His eyes scanned the front rows, filled with journalists and tech bloggers, their screens glowing. Then, his gaze drifted to the side of the auditorium, near the back entrance, where a few of his own staff stood watching. He saw Sarah Jenkins, his receptionist for the past 5 years. She was a single mother, always punctual, always professional, a quiet and steady presence at the front desk. And next to her stood a tall, lanky teenager with glasses, her son. Harrison's mind sparked. This was perfect. An impromptu, organic moment of corporate benevolence. "You know," he continued, his tone shifting to one of intimate revelation. "I see a young man standing in the back there. With his mother, Sarah, who many of you know is the welcoming face of Kronos Dynamics." He gestured warmly. A camera swiveled, and a spotlight found them. Sarah froze, her eyes wide with surprise, while her son, David, instinctively took a small step back, shielded by his mother's frame. The room erupted in thunderous applause. It was a perfect soundbite, a flawless demonstration of trickle-down opportunity. Harrison felt a surge of satisfaction. He was not just a CEO, he was a kingmaker, a benevolent leader lifting up the humble. He saw Sarah manage a tight, polite smile, her hand on her son's arm. The boy just looked down, his expression unreadable. Harrison interpreted it as shock, awe, the understandable paralysis of a kid whose world had just been cracked open. He couldn't have been more wrong. She squeezed David's arm gently. "It's okay," she whispered, though her heart was pounding with a complex mix of anger and embarrassment. Later that evening, in their small, tidy apartment, the silence was heavy. Sarah was making tea, her movements stiff. David was at the kitchen table, a complex schematic spread out before him, his laptop open to a 3D modeling program. To the untrained eye, it was a chaotic jumble of lines and numbers. To a NASA engineer, it was the preliminary design for a new latching mechanism for a CubeSat deployer. "You don't have to do it, you know," Sarah said softly, placing a mug beside his elbow. David looked up, his eyes magnified by his glasses. They were kind eyes, but they held a depth and focus that was unnerving in a 17-year-old. "He just assumed," David said, his voice quiet but edged with a frustration he rarely showed. "He saw you, he saw me, and he filled in the rest of the story. Poor single mom, son with no direction. Let the great CEO swoop in and save the day." Sarah sighed, sinking into the chair opposite him. "He doesn't know, David. No one here does. It's not their fault." "It's not about fault," David countered, pushing his glasses up his nose. "It's about not seeing people. He looks at you and sees a receptionist. He looks at me and sees a prop for his big speech." His life was a study in contrasts. By day, he was a regular high school senior, navigating calculus and English literature. By night, and on weekends, he was helping to solve problems for missions that would fly hundreds of miles above the Earth. He couldn't talk about the specifics, not even to his mom, but she saw the fire in his eyes when he worked. She saw the joy he found in the elegant complexity of it all. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "If we say no, it looks ungrateful. If you do it, it's a waste of your time and it's humiliating." David stared at the schematic on his table. The latch he was designing had to withstand incredible G-forces and operate flawlessly in the vacuum of space. It was a puzzle of 1,000 tiny, interlocking pieces. And suddenly, the situation with Mr. Vance felt like a similar, albeit much more frustrating, puzzle. "I'll do it," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "But we're going to do it my way." The next 2 months were a blur of calculated activity. Harrison Vance, true to his word, assigned a mentor to David, a young, enthusiastic engineer named Mark. The company sent a press release, complete with a photo of Harrison, David, and Sarah, titled "Kronos Dynamics Lifts Up Local Youth." The story got some traction on local news sites. Mark arrived at their apartment for the first meeting, carrying the standard kit of parts, ready to teach the basics. He was met with a fully operational, custom-built robot. It wasn't the clunky, box-like machine Mark expected. It was sleek, compact, and ruthlessly efficient. David had designed and 3D printed most of the unique components himself. The wiring was immaculate, a work of art that spoke of hundreds of hours of practice. "Whoa," Mark breathed, circling the machine. You built this already? I had some parts lying around, David said with a shrug. I figured I'd get a head start. Mark spent the next hour mostly listening. David explained his design choices, the logic behind his code for the autonomous period, the gear ratios he'd chosen for the drivetrain. He spoke of torque, PID loops, and sensor fusion with a fluency that left Mark, a recent MIT graduate, scrambling to keep up. The mentorship session quickly turned into a peer-to-peer collaboration. Mark forgot he was supposed to be the teacher. He reported back to Harrison Vance. The kid's a natural, sir. A real prodigy. I've never seen anything like it. He doesn't need my help, but he's letting me contribute. He's teaching me things. Sarah was there, a knot of anxiety in her stomach. David was calm, moving with a quiet purpose as he ran diagnostics on his robot, which he had named Observer. Harrison Vance arrived with a media crew in tow, ready to capture the triumphant culmination of his pet project. There he is. The star of the show. Harrison announced, clapping David on the shoulder. Ready to show them what you've got, son? David just nodded, his eyes on his laptop screen. Ready as I'll ever be. The competition was fierce. Robots clashed on the field in a ballet of metal and programming. Observer was a marvel. It was faster, more agile, and more precise than almost every other machine. In the autonomous period, it executed its pre-programmed tasks with flawless perfection. In the teleoperated period, David's driving was masterful. He wasn't just playing the game, he was analyzing it, predicting his opponent's moves, exploiting weaknesses in their designs. By the final rounds, a crowd had gathered around their pit. Engineers from other companies, judges, and even rival students were watching, whispering in amazement. Harrison Vance stood at the front, puffing his chest out, accepting the reflected glory. Before the final match, the judges made their rounds for the technical awards. One of the judges, a woman with sharp eyes and a NASA logo embroidered on her polo shirt, stopped at David's station. Her name was Dr. Eris Thorne, a senior systems engineer from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and one of the most respected figures in the field. She didn't look at the robot first. She looked at the laptop screen, where David was reviewing sensor data from the last match. Her eyes widened slightly. That's a Kalman filter for sensor fusion, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. A pretty sophisticated implementation for a high school team. David looked up. Thank you. I had some issues with Eurodrift and magnetometer interference from the motor controllers, so I needed something robust. Dr. Thorne leaned closer, her gaze fixed on the code. She pointed to a specific block. This subroutine, it's incredibly efficient. It reminds me of the orientation tracking algorithm we're using for the TDRS constellation. She paused, her eyes narrowing in thought. I've seen this structure before. In a technical review document. From the Goddard team, a project on CubeSat deployment. The world seemed to slow down for Sarah. The media crew, sensing a moment, pushed their microphones closer. Harrison Vance looked confused, his perfect narrative suddenly veering off script. Dr. Thorne looked from the screen to David's face, and a slow dawn of recognition broke across her features. Jenkins. David Jenkins. You're Dr. Miles's prodigy. You wrote the white paper on gyroscopic precession in microsatellites. David finally looked up from his screen, a small, polite smile on his face. Yes, ma'am. It's an honor to meet you, Dr. Thorne. I've read your work on interplanetary navigation. A stunned silence fell over the pit area. The whirring of robots and the distant cheers of the crowd seemed to fade away. Harrison Vance stepped forward, his own smile looking suddenly brittle. What's going on here? Dr. Miles? Goddard? What is she talking about, David? David took a deep breath. He stood up, finally meeting the CEO's gaze. He wasn't a prop anymore. He was a scientist. The camera flashes were blinding. The reporters surged forward. Dr. Thorne was beaming, a look of pure, unadulterated professional delight on her face. This young man isn't just a future innovator, Mr. Vance, she said, her voice ringing with authority. He's a current innovator. He's doing work that most of my graduate students would struggle with. He's the real deal. The final match was almost an afterthought. David and Observer won, but that wasn't the real victory. Later, as they were packing up, Harrison Vance approached them, the media crew now gone. He looked smaller, diminished. I had no idea, he stammered. I am so sorry. Sarah looked at him, and for the first time, she felt a sliver of pity for the man. When you look at people, Mr. Vance, she said, her voice gentle but firm, you should try to see what's actually there, not just what you expect to see. David nodded in agreement. Thank you for the opportunity, sir, he said, with a grace that was more damning than any accusation. It was an interesting experience. The story, of course, went viral. But it wasn't the one Harrison Vance had wanted. It was the story of the CEO who tried to discover a boy who was already reaching for the stars. It was a story about bias, about the quiet genius that exists all around us, hidden in plain sight. Back in their apartment, the trophy sat on the kitchen table, gleaming under the light. It seemed insignificant next to the complex diagrams and lines of code that represented David's real passion. He was already back at his laptop, lost in the elegant dance of physics and engineering, his eyes on worlds far beyond the convention center floor. He was no longer just a receptionist's son. He was David Jenkins. And his work was just beginning. Thank you for watching this incredible story. If it moved you or made you think, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribe to our channel for more true stories that inspire. See you in the next one.